contractors who do this every day forget this kind of stuff, right? So
Yeah.
it's even harder.
So the coordination, the level of coordination, the handoffs between the trades, I think that most homeowners might be challenged by that and might not get the outcomes that they expect. So find a partner.
Welcome to the Fine Homebuilding Pro Talk Podcast, a regular discussion with building industry and building people. This is Senior Editor Patrick McComb. Today I'm joined by Keith Bohling, an owner-builder who built his own high-performance home in Upstate New York. You can find the Fine Homebuilding Pro Talk Podcast and the original Fine Homebuilding Podcast at finehomebuilding.com/podcast. So, Keith, we should tell folks who are thinking that they're replaying, another episode. You were on previously to talk about your work at NYSERDA, but we got to be clear, you're not representing the agency in this conversation. You're going to be talking about your own house that you built, right?
Yeah, as an owner-builder.
Let's get started here. So you have been building houses and working on them your whole life, as I understand it. Can you talk about that, please?
Yeah, like a lot of Pro Talk, podcast guests, Patrick, there were certainly influences, right? As a young person, my father built the house that I grew up in. They had a dream of moving out of the city and into the country and a more rural lifestyle. And,
I'm going to stop you right there, Keith. So was it under construction while you were living there, or did he get it done and then you moved in?
Yeah, they rented a house. He built the house, and we moved in once it was, we'll say, largely complete. I do have memories as a young boy riding my tricycle around the lower levels, a split level house, riding my tricycle around the lower level, which was designated to become a family room and a guest bedroom. But by the time we moved into the house, was just a concrete slab, had not yet been fitted out.
Did you think that was weird at all, or that was just normal as a little kid living in the house your dad built?
Yeah, that was, I did not appreciate at the time how unique that was. What was interesting is that we lived in a rural area. There wasn't a lot around us, and our best friends across the street, well, the father of that family was my dad's partner in his contracting, home building, and remodeling business. And so we were best friends. He had built their house, or as a partnership, they had built their house as well. So our closest friends that we spent time with, very similar experience. Dad was working on the house, over time as funds became available, and it was a work in progress. It was something that there was little in the house that Dad couldn't fix. There was like about the only time you call a repairman was if an appliance let loose. Anything other than that, Dad had bust out the tools. So yeah, he was a contractor. He did new builds. He did remodeling when I was a kid, and it was a small town. And back in the 70s when I was a kid, bartering was not uncommon. I don't know if it was necessarily common, but it wasn't uncommon. I can remember as a kid, he would barter with the dentist the family dentist that we utilized, and the eye doctor who was from a larger community, a half hour away. And he would barter working on their homes or their offices in exchange for the professional services. And I can remember as a young kid, our after school care for my brother and I and our friends across the street was getting dropped off in town at the office that my dad's company and his partner had an office space rented in town. And we were in the back behind the office after school while my mother and his partner's wife ran the front office. And it was amazing the influences, how unique those were at the time. But I didn't know that growing up in a small town and in a small school. My mother was very proficient at making trips to the supply house or the lumber yard with a shopping list that was written on a scrap of wood, a piece of sheathing or, sometimes a chunk of 2x4. So yeah, I got the bug early. It was fun going out to the job site. Sometimes on the weekends, I would head out. And as I got older, there were, a few times going out and helping out with that. And, always having.
Did you ever think that you would want to do that for a career? Was that ever on your radar that you might want to be a builder?
It wasn't. Reflecting back and hearing you ask this question of other podcast guests, I've thought about that question, and it wasn't. There was a strong preference on my parents' part for us to go to college, right? So that now we're in the mid '80s, and so yeah, preference was go to college, get a degree, get a professional job. I don't know as they necessarily would have pushed back if I had been interested in going in another direction, but um, I didn't see
That was the
myself.
expectation, right?
It was the expectation, and quite honestly, I didn't see myself as being able to run a business. My dad had moved on from remodeling and home building at that time, and was in a different career space. So, there wasn't necessarily a natural path of following in the family, business footsteps. But yeah, I don't think I had the vision to see myself doing that at that time. Um,
So
but it,
let's get to your house. What made you want to build your own high performance home? And was this a series of decisions, or was this something you knew you wanted to do when you started considering it?
Yeah. So, I think that the initial impetus, Patrick, was the first couple of houses that my wife and I owned and the energy hogs that they were. And, at the time, I didn't have a resource like, a state energy office like a NYSERDA or the utility incentives and rebates. And so I hate spending money for energy. To me, it feels like the difference between renting and owning, or paying rent and paying on a mortgage. You pay that rent and you're not really building any equity for it, relative to a mortgage. So, hate spending money on energy. And as time went on and owning the first two homes that we did, um, we started to make improvements and realized that there's a point that you reach where it's diminishing returns, where you need to make a very significant investment to get an existing home to be, net zero or close to net zero. So, um, at the time, we were looking at life changes with our kids getting older, and we decided we want to build our own house. We want a new, clean house, want an energy efficient house. So, I think we were definitely focused on energy efficiency from the beginning. There were other things. We wanted to live in a rural area. We wanted to have a home that we had designed, not somebody else had designed. But yeah, energy efficiency was sort of always on our list. And I think there were a couple of influences. I talked about, hating to spend money on energy. But like yourself, I have a background of working with Habitat for Humanity, more so on a volunteer basis. So I started out, as a walk on a site crew one day, and got there with my tool belt. And as soon as I got out of the truck wearing a tool belt, I think they
You were
drafted me.
pegged. They
Exactly.
had a
Yeah.
mark on you, buddy.
That is exactly right, and I can't tell you how many people that I know that the story is similar that way. And so I was a volunteer for a while, and then took on some additional responsibility, volunteering with the board of directors and sort of the operations side, as well as the Saturday work crews. And we got to a point with Habitat for Humanity where we were very good at building homes at a more affordable cost. They're very, very good at that, between materials and partnerships and volunteer labor, and all the things that successful Habitat affiliates do. But we also got to the point where we realized, wow, there's a total cost of ownership, right? It's not just that upfront and the mortgage, but it's also the operating expense for the home. And so our local Habitat affiliate started evolving into that total cost of ownership view, and what can we do better in building that affordable home so that it becomes easier for that family to support. So that also
So did
sort
you
of
take
fueled
some of
that.
those things that you were doing at your Habitat affiliate and apply them to your own build?
Um, Not directly. I think part of the evolution we went to was like 2x4 to 2x6 walls,
Uh-huh.
and better air sealing and things like that. I would say that once I got bitten by the bug, with our owner build, we were able to move a little more quickly in adopting some things than maybe Habitat did. So yeah, we've done more here than say the Habitat affiliate had done when we started our build.
Can you talk about the house? What's it look like? What are the features? Where did
Yeah.
the design come from? And is it yours?
Yeah, so it is our design. My wife and I like to call it the 7-year plan. We bought the piece of property. We were extremely fortunate. We bought the piece of property in 2008, 2009, when the economy was in recession, and we actually bought it from somebody who had planned to be an owner builder, but ran into some financial challenges with that. So we actually bought the piece of property off Craigslist ad, quite honestly, and uh, that started, a process of planning. And yeah, wife and I went through, numerous floor plans. We had the fortune of sort of not living with, but seeing side by side. Her parents retired and had a house built that her father had designed, and so we were able to leverage some of the lessons learned there. So it's a two-story colonial. It's a very simple rectangular box, and by not having gables and dormers and inset and bump outs and things like that, the building shell is easier. To make very airtight, simpler on construction, less cost per square foot, things like that. So we did the 7-year plan, I like to call it, for the floor plan and the design, and we did hire an architect to draw up construction drawings for us, and he had a few suggestions to improve the aesthetic of the home, especially in the facade that faces the street.
Did you pay
We
attention?
we did, and there, I'll send you a picture you can post on the podcast notes. There was one window that we added way up tall on a 3-story gable end. That was a rather plain end before that, and so by adding a window actually in the attic, it helped break up that tall facade. So in some ways, the house is a very ordinary 2-story colonial. We laid it out with universal design in mind, and this was a pretty important consideration for us. I would say almost as important as building an efficient home. We
But
planned
it's two
age.
stories, Keith.
It is, but the owner's suite is on the first floor.
Mm.
So as we design the house, the first floor has the common spaces, right, living, dining, kitchen, but it also includes the owner's suite. And the universal design is, I think, one of those things that is um, maybe underutilized, maybe underappreciated by many builders. It takes so little incremental planning and so little incremental cost to do it when a home is built versus trying to retrofit. Simple things: 36-inch doorways, some places pocket doors instead of swing doors. Um, Designing a place for a ramp. When we built the house, my mother-in-law was limited mobility, used a wheelchair, so we put in a ramp right from the get-go. And so when it's designed well, it can integrate and not seem like an add-on. We did a curbless shower with an entryway, and we had the experience of my in-laws and them trying to navigate their house as they age in place, and sort of took some lessons from there, not just doing the tile shower, but doing the curbless shower with the linear drains. So we enjoy the benefit now. We have the benefit of hopefully being able to age in place later. But one of the most, I'm going to call it, innovative things that we did was we put hookups for the washer and dryer on that main floor in the mudroom. Now, my wife said, I love having the laundry in the basement. I said, really? She said, yeah, because it gives me more exercise. Up and down in the basement, cycling the laundry, 3, 4, 5, whatever loads, number of loads per week. And it gives me some exercise. She says, can't we put the laundry down there? I said, yeah, but we're still going to put the hookups on the main floor as well as downstairs. So the laundry's downstairs. We have hookups on the main floor so that if a time comes we're not able to navigate the stairs with carrying the laundry, that we can go ahead and move the laundry equipment to the mudroom on the main floor and handle that concern. Um,
Insulation levels. You mentioned that you were trying to get to net zero. So did you go hog wild with insulation?
we did enhanced insulation. I wouldn't say we did hog wild. It's been interesting hearing Ian talk about the build he and his wife went through, and we didn't do as much as some folks, but we did more than others. So our walls are double stud walls, and they're two by four walls with a 1 inch gap between them. So of course the 1 inch gap, we break the thermal bridging and make our electrician happy because we gave him a very nice
Hmm.
raceway for roughing in the wiring, and then two by four walls. So our total cavity depth is 8 inches, and we did dense pack cellulose there. So the program for efficiency was interesting as an owner builder, Patrick, because acting as my own GC, and I had a friend that was helping us with some of the coordination and introduction to some of the subs that he knew from his work. But as the owner builder and acting as the GC myself, I was not here every day supervising the work. I had a day job, and I kept that day job. And much like other people have balanced the cost of self-performing versus hiring out, there was much work that I have the skill, I have the tools, I have the capability of doing and building the house, but it was really better off for me to maintain my day job and hire somebody else to do those. So part of the consideration was not just the program for the insulation and the air sealing and where are our barriers and everything, and I'll go into some detail there. But part of the program, part of the consideration for that program is what can I trust other folks to do that involves as little risk as possible for us as the owners of the home. And what I
So
mean
if I
by
can
that is
guess, you have no assurance that folks are going to do a good job air sealing, right? And it's difficult to fix that after the fact. So
that is
you
a
you
yeah.
you tried to employ strategies that made that less of an issue, if I could guess. Is that close?
Yeah, you're exactly right. Very perceptive that the things that I wanted to do were weighed against what's the easiest for folks to pick up, easiest to do with the least amount of worry. So for instance, I know the best practice and I'm familiar with the techniques and the drawings and the details for rigid exterior insulation board. But doing so, let me back up a step. Our budget did not allow us to hire one of the high performance builders in our area. There are some fantastic builders in our area that build high performance and very resilient homes. And unfortunately, their per square foot prices just exceeded the budget for what we wanted to build. And so in doing it ourselves and hiring interviewing and hiring subs ourselves, we were somewhat limited in the scale of sub that we could afford. The siding crew, the framing crew, they didn't have experience with exterior insulation. And if we had gone with crews that builder or subs that had experience in those areas, it would have blown our budget. And there were compromises we weren't comfortable, making. So, the wall program, starting at the outside, zip system sheathing, so not zip R, just a regular zip system sheathing, taped, and then the double stud wall, and dense pack cellulose, and then painted drywall on the inside. So, by building the wall that way, the exterior details for the siding crew, for the framer who's installing the windows and the doors and sealing those, they're very familiar with,
Super
sill plant.
conventional, right? Nothing weird at all. Yeah.
Exactly, exactly. Sill pan flashing, caulking, sheathing tape, that type of thing. So the add-ons for them were relatively minor. It's caulking the plates down, caulking the sheathing to the bottom plates, right before they put the sheathing on the walls and stand them up. Things along those lines. So their work was by and large similar to what they're used to doing, which helps one with efficiency, right, and therefore the cost they quote to you, but to the level of risk. So in doing that program of some basic caulk air sealing, as they were standing up the walls, and then the dense pack cellulose. We did our first blower door test, and we blew a 2.0 ACH 50. So we exceed code, right? We're in zone 5. So code is 3 air changes per hour. And we got to 2 with some pretty basic details. In fact, we didn't have any air sealing on the lid. What we had was the drywall was up. It was not prime, but it was taped. And we had 18 inches of cellulose sitting on top of that. We did not do any can lights. All of our lighting fixtures are low profile LEDs that just mount right to the electrical box. So the only, penetration is the 4-inch round box, and our air sealing and lid was simply dense packed cellulose. So we get all done with that, and we're at two, which is great. We beat code, and that's a pretty good house, right? I did some reading on the pretty good house, right?
What
Um,
do you think? Makes sense, right?
it it does. I think that there's there are compromise points where you know we maybe don't need passive house for every new build, but we can do a lot better than code. But we also have indoor air quality concerns, with allergies, and because we live in a rural area, numerous areas around here involve farming, but also people burn wood for heating, and so we didn't want to be concerned with that coming in the house through unintended means. So we had the house treated with aero barrier. And I know this come up a couple of times on the podcast, and it was a fantastic experience being able to watch that. And in 2 hours, they've got the instrumented blower door operating while the aero barrier treatment is being pumped through the house, and you can see that level of infiltration just dropping, and we went from 2 to 0.55.
Wow. Did you
So
have trouble finding an aero barrier contractor in rural New York? I bet you did.
So yeah, there isn't a contractor in Northeast New York. I did interview two from out of the area, and we were very very happy going with Goose from Zone 6 Energy in Vermont. He recognized my experience and what we wanted to do with the house, and so it was a beneficial partnership, and I learned a lot. He actually had kind of a unique experience with our house, in that it was a very very humid, damp day on the day that the installation was scheduled. He'd come here the day before, done the prep, and then scheduled the work for the
And we should
following
tell folks
day.
that makes it take a lot longer, right?
It
Because
it
this stuff
does.
builds up more slowly when it's humid.
Exactly. So the air that they're pumping into the house to pressurize it and push that aerosol sealant into, all of the leaks in the home. Yeah, if that air being pumped into the house is humid, it's more difficult to get the aero barrier material to start accumulating, right, and blocking. So he was able to do some things with some heating and some cycling and some pressure changes. It was quite an interesting experience. So yeah, with aero barrier, we've heard the number before. It can run about $1.50 a square foot. Um, but what that involved, Patrick, was one contractor being responsible for, really getting our air tightness down to our target. I didn't have to necessarily ride herd and constantly be monitoring and coaching and mentoring the framer, mainly the framer, but also the insulation contractor. That to a large extent, I could let them do their business as usual. And again, that there's a trade off. But it helped us from the budget perspective, where they could do sort of their business as usual, and the aero barrier picked up the difference and brought us down to that 0.55.
We'll be back with more right after this. Regular listeners to the Fine Home Building podcast have heard us mention Zip System Building Enclosures, the integrated sheathing and sealing solution system, providing a streamlined approach to exterior water, air, and thermal management. But they may not be aware of the multiple resources available to builders with application or installation questions. Huberwood.com has the install detail library and access to the technical information team. How-to information is also available on the Zip System YouTube channel and on Instagram and TikTok by following @HuberWood. Did you go with the European windows, or did you do something more mainstream?
Yeah, so we did not. We looked at the cost increment. So for us, the baseline window was an Anderson 400 series casement window with low E coating. So we love casements. We love the visibility on the light that you see through them. So that was our
And
our
we should say they're
baseline.
more airtight in all things being equal. Yeah.
Exactly right. Exactly right. And there were some free things that we did. Speaking of windows for a second, there were some what I call free things that we did to implement best practices in the design phase of the house. So windows on the south side of the house are larger and more numerous than the windows on the source on the north side. On the north side of the house, we have on the main floor we have bathrooms and part of the master, and upstairs we have the kids' bedrooms and the guest bedroom facing north. Smaller windows and fewer of them on the north
Mhm.
side. So yeah, when we compared the Anderson 400 series casements and like you say, a great window for air infiltration, um, and then we looked at what would the upcharge be to go to a triple pane window, whether they're some of the newer ones, U.S. made or imported ones. Uh, the cost multiplier was very high, far higher than I expected. And I realize we're going back, so 2018, we would have been specifying this, Patrick. And so, quite frankly, it was less expensive to increase the solar capacity of the PV array that we have on the roof. So, going back to that planning, we plan the house so that the ridge line runs east west. And so we have a complete plane of the gable roof, right, that faces south. We don't have any penetrations in the south side of the roof. So the plumbing stack comes out the north face of the roof. The radon vent comes out the gable end in the attic, doesn't come up through the south facing roof. So we had already planned as far as the number of panels that we could fit on the roof. We included a solar design in our initial design of the house and sizing of the roof mass. But what
How
we
big
did,
is the panel array, Keith?
yeah, so it's 36 panels. There's 3 rows of 12. So the upstairs of the house is
So it's got to
footprint.
be between 5 and 10 kilowatts is my guess, right?
Yeah, it's actually 12.96,
Wow, that's a
almost
big array,
13.
dude.
Well,
Yeah.
and so here was the trade-off. So that multiplier for the window package would have been better than two. Our window package for just the materials was in the range of about $16,000. Um,
You
and
can
we
buy
would
a
have
lot of solar panels for 16 grand is your point, I
so
think.
the exactly so the multiplier was two. It would have doubled it. So what we went with was a higher performing panel. So rather than a 280 or a 300-watt panel, the panels are 360 watts each. So you pay an upgrade fee for that, but the amount of time and the amount of money that's paid back by that, especially considering down the road we would consider driving an electric vehicle and charging that at home. There's sort of where the trade off came to.
And you're heating and cooling with mini splits, is that right?
Yeah. So, and that was kind of an interesting story. So, yeah, we're using air source heat pumps, 4 mini split heads in a 2,800 square foot house. And it was really interesting. We got 2 quotes from 2 different HVAC subcontractors, and the 2 quotes for national name brands that you would recognize, and the quotes were within $800 of each other, but they had 2 vastly different approaches. One manufacturer and therefore their installer were promoting a single outdoor compressor with a manifold system and 4 indoor heads. And we knew we wanted 4 indoor heads in the design of the house just as far as distribution was concerned. The other quote that we received from another national manufacturer suggested that we do 4 compressors with our 4 inside heads for a one-to-one relationship. And that's actually the path that we took. And it wasn't a price savings. Like I said, the quotes are very close to each other, but we did it one for redundancy in case there's a problem with an outdoor unit. We have others that can sort of pick up the slack there. One of the other reasons that we did it was to um, allow easier shoulder season or partial load use of the system. So
Yeah, those big systems don't have very good turn down ratios, right? They need to be running at a higher capacity, generally speaking, right?
exactly. So if you have one exterior unit that's, I don't know, let's say 40,000 BTUs, throttling that back, you can only get it down to a certain level. Whereas if you have, as we went with individual exterior units, where they're anywhere from 9,000 to I think our larger one is 15,000 BTUs, and that throttles down to 25% perhaps. Then it's a much more efficient run. But the other thing that we can do is we can turn off some of the units altogether in the shoulder season. So, for instance, upstairs, heats up very, very well in on a sunny day, right? So that's actually the first one that we turn off at the end of the heating season. And we might keep the one on that's near the mudroom and the kitchen, where we might have doors opening and closing, and windows and ventilation for cooking. We might leave that one on deeper into that shoulder season. So yeah, it definitely allows some redundancy. It definitely allows some easier partial load use. But the other thing is related to a guest you had on recently. The electrician was talking about generators, and so we don't have a whole home permanently installed generator, but we have a portable generator that I manage when we have an outage. And so by having four individual one-to-one compressor to mini split head unit relationships, we can do load shedding. We can maintain some heat flowing in the house while we're also using the generator to power other loads like the well and other required loads.
Hmm. This is kind of an off the wall question, but I've had a number of conversations with people about the aesthetics of PV panels. And it came to mind when you were talking about your 4 outdoor mini split compressors, right? I think
Yeah.
there'd be folks who wouldn't want to look at 4 outdoor units as an example. How do you see that? What are those folks missing, and what have you figured out?
So I think it's a very valid concern. I think that there are neighborhoods with beautiful homes with a beautiful aesthetic, and having a mini split compressor visible from sort of that roadside view. I can see that being unattractive. I can see some people finding that unattractive. I think that to the extent you can move it to the back of the house, the side of the house, you shield it with landscaping. There are a lot of techniques, right, that you can use there. We're fortunate. It's a rural home. Little of it is visible from the road due to terrain, and it it doesn't bother our sense of aesthetic. I'm going to be honest with you. I geek out on this, right, Patrick?
Yeah,
And
me
I
too.
smile every time I go past those heat pumps because I'm not burning any fossil fuels. The house is net zero with the solar panels, right? That's the sort of the bumper sticker of the story is 2.5 years in the house and it's net zero. So we don't mind the aesthetic. We put two on each side, two on one side of the house and two on another side of the house. So we don't have a large,
You don't have
array
4 in a
of
row.
four of them, right? Um, and we built I built some nice decorative roofs over them to keep the weather off, and we planned their locations so they're not in our view scope and not in our audible range when we sit out on our porch or our deck. So we don't hear them and we don't see them when we're sitting out having a drink or eating out on the patio. Um, by having them on the driveway side of the house, it allows me easy conversation with people who come to visit. My wife and I are, as you can imagine, we're passionate about this, and we use the house as a teaching opportunity. And who knows, perhaps it's affected some friendships we have. But
Can I show you my heat pump?
exactly. But some people ask, what is that? Or, hey, what's that on the wall, right? With the ductless mini split head inside. So, like many things in life, there's a time and a place for everything. For this house, having four, exterior compressors was an easy trade-off for us, and one where the practicality outweighed the aesthetic concerns. But some of the things that I talk about here are not perfect for everybody. Everybody needs to make their own sort of trade-offs and decisions, whether you're a builder, whether you're a homeowners who is contracting with a builder. um, you know Doing the planning, doing the analysis, doing the trade-off analysis before breaking ground will help you reach the decision that's best for that circumstance.
Keith, we've heard a lot from listeners, and I think it might have been inspired by Ian's house build. And then we've been following another gentleman, Chris, on the podcast similarly. What advice would you give to folks who are considering building their own high performance home?
I think you need to find a strong partner, and that partner could be somebody who's been through it before. It could be a project manager. It could be somebody who's maybe retired from home building or from remodeling. I think that most homeowners would um, might have a challenging time coming up with all of the questions to ask and queuing up all of the selections that need to be made. And maybe the third biggest challenge, or the third challenge, which might be the biggest, is the level of coordination necessary. Where's that handoff between, like, we pre-plumbed for a radon vent, not knowing if we would need an active radon system, so we pre-plumbed for that. Well, so we need part of that down below the slab, right? PVC pipe running down through the slab to the crushed stone below, below our rigid foam board. All right, well, who places that collar? Is that the excavator? Is it my concrete contractor? Is he going to
And
remember
contractors who
that?
do this every day forget this kind of stuff, right? So
Yeah.
yeah, it's even
So I
harder.
yeah. So the coordination, the level of coordination, the handoffs between the trades. I think that most homeowners might be challenged by that and might not get the outcomes that they expect. So find a partner. It might need to be creative because, like, you've talked about an integrator in the past, right? A systems integrator, and that role was growing, and the recognition of the need for that role is growing. Um, is there a role like that for somebody who wants to be an owner builder? Boy, I haven't really seen a prevalence of that in the market yet, but I think that there's an opportunity. So yeah, my biggest piece of advice for homeowners, do your
Is get
research,
some
see
help.
get some help. Yeah, yeah,
So you've lived in the house for how long now, Keith?
yeah. So we're 2.5 years in.
And is there anything that has been revealed since you've been living there that you would change if you had to do it over again?
Yeah, so good question, and it's funny because my wife and I'll sit back and especially during COVID, right? You're home a whole lot and ask
And all you
ourselves,
got to do is look at the stuff around the house, right?
look at the house, listen to the house, that type of thing. What would we do differently next time? Um, I think the biggest challenge, quite honestly, with the house, and I share this as learnings for folks, has been dehumidification in the summer months. With a tight, high performing home, it's tough to get enough airflow through the mini splits to adequately dehumidify the house without making it very cold.
Did you
Um,
put an ERV in, Keith?
Yeah, so we put in an HRV. So I sort of researched both. We went with an HRV, and yes, so we did an HRV. We did the calculations for the amount of airflow we needed. We worked with the HVAC sub to design the system and duct it where we wanted our supplies and our returns. And I think that you bring up a great point. I think that if we were designing the house today, I would look at an HRV that incorporated dehumidification, or I would look at a standalone dehumidifier. When we started 4 years ago, I didn't know it would be the challenge that it is now, and that centralized dehumidification has been a fairly recent, right, come to prominence, or best practice, if you will. But today, I think I would strongly consider that. Um, I would
Aren't
also
your aren't your mini splits supposed to be great at that? I mean, you can tweak them to focus on that even, correct?
You can. So there is there's a button, there's a mode for dehumidification. And what I've come to learn with this manufacturer and another one that a colleague of mine at NYSERDA has, um, the dehumidification is essentially a programming option for the unit that tells the unit to run the fan speed on the lowest that it can and to run the refrigerant compressor cycle as hard as it can. And so, with a very low airflow and a very, very cold indoor coil, that's essentially its dehumidification mode. Um, but with the number of square feet we have, and it's 9 foot ceilings on the first floor, 8 foot on the second floor, and running the HRV, right? So we are cycling fresh air into the house. Um, that it can dehumidify. Like everything else you hear about mini splits, keep them running constantly.
Mm.
Adjust the button up or down as you need for comfort, for your for your temperature. Set it and forget it. Leave them running, and in time it can dehumidify. I think the challenge we run into is we enjoy fresh air, and so in the parts of the summer that aren't terribly humid, we're a fresh air home, and we do open the windows. But then you get 2 weeks of humidity, so you close up the house and you start up the mini splits, and it can take it
Days,
days,
right? Yeah.
days to get the humidity down to a comfort level, a comfortable point without making the house, 65
Cold.
degrees, which
Yeah.
which neither of us want. Um, I think one of the other changes that I would make is ask my HVAC contractor to put in a dedicated deep filter box for the fresh air coming into the HRV. We told them we wanted filtration, and they said, "Oh yeah, this unit we're specifying, which is a Fantech unit, it has filtration built in. You'll be just fine." And so the filters that this unit features are those very thin woven mesh electrostatic filters,
They
and they
catch
do
rocks, is what I'm told.
they do a great job at catching bugs. It's interesting the number of bugs that come in, but they don't filter down to wood smoke that I mentioned earlier, and they don't filter down to the fine green and yellow pollen, that's about to start up right here in late April and May. Um, and so I buy off the shelf MERV 12, MERV 13 filters and cut them up and insert them um, over in the box, in the air exchange box, over the fresh air intake side of the heat exchange core.
I bet you don't tell your wife you do this.
Oh, actually, I do, and she laughs, and she says, "You know what? That's probably cheaper than." But once the system is built, the house is insulated and everything, I wasn't really keen on sort of opening up the ductwork, to add a dedicated filter box.
Do you have a wood stove?
No, we don't.
No,
No.
not a fan, it sounds like.
Um, no, they aren't clean to operate inside the house. Um, in moving that wood into the house, there's, dirt and bugs and whatever that come along with that.
And mold and all kinds of stuff, yeah.
And we didn't want the energy penalty of having a chimney. So, my wife really wanted a fireplace, and eventually I was able to help her see that they're great for ambiance, but there is a significant energy penalty even with a well built fireplace, as well as a budget hit with that. Um, and one of the things we did to be more efficient and that air tightness we were talking about is we bought a heat pump dryer. So we're not venting a 4-inch duct outboard of the house every time we dry load clothes, and taking that conditioned air and just pumping it outside is just, it kind of rubbed
What
me the wrong way. So
what's the verdict on the heat pump dryer? I've heard mixed reviews.
yeah, so full disclosure, 90% of the time we love it. It does take longer than a gas or an electric resistance dryer. So each load on average takes an hour and 40 minutes is the default cycle, rather than most dryers, it's around an hour or so. It doesn't do well with very thick and heavy things, like when you want to wash and dry a quilt. That will take 2 cycles to dry. But for our needs, it has worked well. We don't have to do all the laundry on one day, consecutive loads. Um, and so we can space apart the loads to account for the longer drying cycle. But there's nothing that it hasn't dried. It just takes sometimes longer. Um, but that heat pump is more efficient, right, than the electric resistance, and not pumping that conditioned air overboard through a traditional dryer is really the benefit that we see there.
Can I assume you're making domestic hot water also with a heat pump? Is that
Actually,
true?
yeah. So actually, we're not. When I say we're a net zero home, I should be clearer. We're net zero electric, but we do have propane for a tankless hot water heater. There's a couple of reasons that, we talked about trade-offs earlier, right? And everybody's got to kind of weigh, the pros and cons and different options you can go with. I knew that I wanted a tankless on-demand hot water heater, and the ones that run on electric have a tremendous draw, and they aren't really mainstream products in the U.S. yet. We didn't want to do a distributed, multi-point with just heating at the point of consumption. And so, the only other option with tankless is propane. So we have a high efficiency propane tankless. And one of the reasons I wanted tankless is sort of the program of planning with the home was college age daughters. And so they're home part of the time and they're away part of the time. And so the occupancy and the consumption in the home varies a lot from season to season. The tankless can handle that very easily. Now, electric heat pump water heaters are a very efficient option and can be a very good option in many homes. But it's interesting, our basement is cold. We don't have a heating plant down there. So without a heating plant and not even a electric resistance dryer, right? Our dryer is, you can think of it as kind of a net zero dryer, right? With a heat pump, you're using the hot side and the cold side in a heat pump dryer. So the basement is cold if not cool, or cool if not cold, most of the year. And so putting a heat pump water heater in a cold or a cool basement, not going to be terribly efficient. It's going to fail over to that electric resistance with some frequency. So we
And
went
it's
with
going to make the
propane.
basement even colder, right? That's the,
It
yeah.
is. It is. Yeah.
It's been a pleasure talking to you, Keith. Is there anything you'd like to tell our audience before we go?
Yes.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, I would say try to do one thing better every day. It won't all work. Whether it's your personal life, whether it's, building homes, right? For those of you that are builders and remodelers, it won't all work. Document what didn't work and why. Celebrate the successes, celebrate the progress. If you're in the trades, ask yourself, how can I monetize it? One thing better every day. And I think that for people associated with this industry, besides reading Fine Homebuilding and some of the other publications out there, there's a lot that we can learn from social media sharing. When you follow resources and see the posts from, Steve Basic and Aaron Thomas Aquinas and Justin, of course. One of the ones I'm loving following now is Swinger Builders. And on Instagram, they're highlighting. They just hired Steve Cantor, who's been posting on their Instagram feed with motivational content and challenges about your mindset going to work every day. And his job title there is Chief Performance Officer, Chief Performance and Safety Officer. But as Chief Performance Officer, he's helping them get better, not just in their technical skills, but in how they work as a team, how they work together. What mindset are they approaching going to work every day? And so, my challenge to everybody listening to the podcast and myself, and I have to keep reminding myself, what are you doing better today than you did yesterday?
What are you doing better today, Keith, than you did yesterday?
Putting myself out there and helping
Very
helping
good.
folks learn from our experience as owner builders, and learn how we can de-risk building high performance homes.
Mm. It's been a pleasure talking to you, Keith, and I am grateful for your ongoing participation in the conversation with the regular podcast too. And I hope folks who listen to this will think of more questions that I didn't to ask about your build and how it went. It's fascinating, and I sure other folks feel the same.
Yeah, it's a passion that if we can teach and share, it helps other folks not learn at the school of hard knocks.
And there's so much of that in home building. I think you would agree.
There is.
Well, unfortunately, that is all the time we have for today. Thanks very much for listening. Thanks to Keith for joining us. Stay safe, everybody. Keep craft alive. Do something better every day.